Well, and there we have it. We know that it's dominated the discussion platforms, well, towards the last 24 hours or the beginning of the day. Yesterday it was just a wishy-washy kind of thing, but over the last 12 hours it's dominated the discussion platforms. And at the center of it all, we also know that Professor Jampo now says that he is heading to the court. His lawyers are expected to sue. But in the meantime, the documentary, SexForGrades, and spanned across West Africa, opens up a conversation that many could relate to. Anybody who passed through tertiary institutions in our country would always know about this myth, if not speculation, about this. And we decided, while we follow up on the subject of Professor Jampo and the reliefs that he may be seeking of the court, the bigger conversation about really are there abuses by teachers who should know better while heading institutions or teaching students. Well, so we decided to bring some of the best conversationists in the realm of gender, women's equality, but more so improving the rights of young people in our country. Diana Diko is not an alien to the show. She is a gender consultant, had worked with the Ministry of Gender and Gender and Social Protection. I believe that should be the
Gender, Children and Social Protection.
Gender, Children and Social Protection.
Good.
And she is the right person for this job this morning. Good morning to you, Diana.
Good morning, Roland.
And another gender activist is here as well, but somebody also who is a co-convener for CSOs, works closely in related areas of improving the well-being of not only young girls but also children or students is here. Ifwa Edith Chidi is also here. Good morning to you, Ifwa.
Good morning, Roland.
Yeah. And now we know he is going to sue. He's going to the court. But this is the reaction of Professor Ransford Jampo. We'll just take that and read that to you. And explicitly, he says that this is his own view on the subject, his own take, and we'll put that on the screens for you right now. He says, I've been counselled to be silent on the matter of entrapment masterminded by a certain unscrupulous people with the aid of BBC against me. And he continues, unfortunately, my student this afternoon also insisted I say something to clear the air, because before this point too, he had again put up a post that he was not going to comment. Of course, subsequently, he also spoke to Joy News on the subject. I have a lot to say about this matter, but I'm also suing the BBC for defamation, so I will keep some of the facts to myself. And he went on subsequently, let me state, however, that I have not involved myself in the BBC so-called SexForGrades and will never do so. Their own video documentary evidence could not establish this. I am aware of my university's sexual harassment policy, and I've always adhered to its dogmas. Well, we also know that subsequently, he said the lady involved in my informal conversation was not my student, and she wasn't also a student from the University of Ghana where I teach. I therefore cannot decipher how I could manipulate the grade of a non-student. The BBC ignored all her contributions to our conversation. They ignored all her messages she sent to me. They ignored my objections and letters written to refute the allegations. They also edited the video to suit their purpose. While I prepare to sue the BBC for carrying out the most bogus and unprofessional piece of documentary in the world so far, I wish to remind them that Ghana, and for that matter Africa, has long thrown out the yoke of colonialism. We are an independent continent with our own institutions that can handle internal matters. There cannot be much talk about strengthening institutions when they are blatantly prevented from doing their work by needless intruders like the BBC. The University of Ghana, where I teach, has credible outfits and mechanisms for dealing with matters of harassment? Why did the BBC refuse to encourage the one harassed to report the matter? Sexual harassment, he continues, is also a criminal matter. He asks the question then, why has the BBC refused to report the matter? I am aware of those behind this, just for the purposes of gagging me, but I wish to assure them that I remain Yaojampo. I won't be silenced. Their worst may be to kill me. But in as much as I love my family, I won't be scared to die in the cause of keeping regimes on their toes without malice, just for the purposes of shaping our governance landscape. I have not engaged in any so-called sex for grades, and I will stay true to my calling in doing my best for God, students, and country. That's his address. Yaojampo, A31, Pabio, PAV, and Sir Street, Sopong. And the one also at Latte Kriapem. But we've had some reactions from the University of Ghana. We'll play that out to you. They have, apparently, a sexual harassment committee is headed by Mrs. Margaret Amokohene. We'll bring you a reaction.
What we intend to do is to investigate the matter, follow our processes, and if these gentlemen are found culpable, recommend appropriate sanctions to the Vice Chancellor to apply because he's a chief disciplinarian. The university will not say that these are cases that don't happen, but you see, you can only investigate when there's proof. And in fact, in our response to the BBC, we asked for the evidence that they have to help us with our own investigations. And initially, now they've said no, and so they want us to properly apply for it if you're going to do. And if they bring it to us, then that's the evidence to proceed on.
What happens to these two professors while investigations go on?
Well, I think the senior management of the university will soon make a decision, and you will know what the decision is. If they are found to be obstructing the processes, then the university will have to take the appropriate measures. But it's not for me to decide. It's for senior management to decide what to do. Ours is to take the evidence we have and to begin our investigations, and in fact we've already started. But I must say that in the cases of sexual harassment, really, usually it's difficult to prove. So it's not as if the university doesn't take these cases seriously. The university takes them very seriously.
Well, now we have to come back to the subject, because it's a subject that seemed to have opened a can of worms. And now we've had even former students, not only from the University of Ghana, from other tertiary institutions, other universities also coming, not only on Facebook, but also telling their own story in mainstream media as well. And now let's go back. And what's your own take on the general mindset and also what the speculations have been on the subject?
It is true that an accused person is only guilty after being found beyond reasonable doubt. But I think there is no woman under this planet who will just come out and make unfounded allegations like that. And we all have been to tertiary institutions, and as women, we know that is a practice that prevails. It has been there for ages, but it is now out there because of the advent of social media. It has happened over and over and over again. Most of us women have experienced it, but we're scared to talk about it.
Now, Dinah, if we take the University of Ghana, for example, just like what pertains in some of the best tertiary institutions, they have a sexual harassment policy. And even to wit, they have a committee that is supposed to take care of complaints each time they arise. There should be a good reason why the university has it too. Is it just for best practices, just for the face of it? But you think that should have been the norm, and so they should follow through when such actions come up?
Yes. To start with, organizations having sexual harassment policy is actually for best practice, one. But best practice emerge out of experience, and the experience has been institutions where particularly they are both sexes, and now even with single sexes there are issues of sexual harassment. The statistics present very strongly that sexual harassment is one of the most pervasive form of sexual abuse around the world. So organizations are mandated and required by law. Different laws in our country require that institutions have sexual harassment policies, and the University of Ghana does have a sexual harassment policy. Last night, I felt compelled to review the sexual harassment policy of the University of Ghana, and I must say it's quite a strong policy. It has a good definition of what constitutes sexual harassment. It has the reporting guidelines. So then it states the formal reporting guidelines, the informal ones, and it guides very strongly what the institution should do. It does have a committee. It has an adjudication committee, I think, and then it has the anti-sexual harassment committee. So I think the system itself in University of Ghana regarding policy, it's a very strong one. However, I was listening to Radio Joy FM yesterday and this morning, and I heard students from the university saying that our university should do better than only advertising and publicizing the existence of a policy. They think that the university is good at telling people, to some extent, good at saying that we have a policy, but it does not have the willpower to follow through with sanctions. And I think if you do a rough statistics in the University of Ghana, given the research that establishes that sexual harassment in universities are high, the number of sanctions that the university may have had by now is very low. And so there is a problem there regarding, and I think the existence of a policy just tells us that there's an intention to address. Is the intention being backed by goodwill? Those things need to be queried somewhere.
And that's a very insightful contribution from you, because many of the times, even from away from school, even into the workplace, institutions that tend to replicate what structure of multinationals should be tend to have some of these policies for good intentions. But when it comes to local, do we just have them for the purposes of having them, or its actualization becomes a difficulty, per your experiences?
Okay, I've said this before on your show that Ghana tends to be a patriarchal society. So we may have all these policies in place. Yeah, you said it the first time you came here. Yes, I've said it over and over again on several platforms that we have issues. Lately, you can't work in civil society without having a safeguarding policy approved by our donors.
For example?
For example, with Star Ghana, my organization is a grant partner of Star Ghana. You will not be given your funding to carry out your projects if your safeguarding policy is not inspected. If your JESI policy is not, you will not get funding to do so. It is compelling most of us in civil society to work towards our safeguarding policies and also put measures in place to address such issues should it happen. We are saying that even on the field now where we work on our various fields of work, you need a safeguarding policy to cater for the audience that you work with. So I will say that in the private sector, these things work. But in government institutions, I do not know because I don't work in the public sector. But what I can also say is that, Roland, let me leave it here. I know me.
But we also do know that in order for institutions to actualize this, they have people who have nurtured their credentials over time. But those people are also part of the society.
Yes.
How do socio-cultural behavioral patterns tend to inhibit the ability of institutions to actualize some of these policies and the intentions for which they put them there?
I think it does heavily. It does. There's a gross influence of the sociocultural belief of a certain group of people on the policies that they even formulate. In our country, it's even heavy. For example, go to Joy FM, Joy News social media platforms and look at the response that you are getting to the video SexForGrades and to other. I've seen the ones that attack the women, the ones that question the credibility of the women, the ones that, but those are even less worrying than the ones that say that we are going, words like we are going to chop the women. I mean, can't we have our freedom? Can't we have sex in peace? And so then people are believing that they are entitled to the bodies of women.
So there's some form of entitlement.
There's a lot of form of entitlement. There's a lot of form of sex objectification of women. There's a lot of narrative and rhetoric that suggests that women are good for sex. What is the big deal? And above all, there's a normalization of sexual harassment that makes it look normal even to women. Note, Roland, this backlash that we are getting to some extent on social media is not only being held by men. Women also believe that it's either your fault or it is normal. What's the big deal? And I blame them not, because I think we are birthed out of a socialization that makes us understand that you are either a toy for men or you are meant to satisfy men as a woman. And if you begin to experience sexual harassment from age 10, it works in your psyche that women are meant for that purpose. And I hear women saying that men are like that. And you even hear in marriage that men cheat, so wives should cool off. And I tell people that don't make our men look like dogs or animals. Our men they make decisions, they respect themselves, and don't present the narrative as though men are weak. The same society that says men are strong and powerful, on another front, says that men are weak and lack self-control. So if a student throws herself at him, as a lecturer, he has no choice but to have sex with her. Sexual harassment, sexual abuse, a critical situation, let's not joke with it.
Now, this contribution then will transition me to ask a question. If you look at the scenario, and we have to say, in the mind of Professor Jampo, he may be thinking or be tagging this lady is not my student. But I think the intent of the whole piece was to create a scenario, and if somebody will be tempted, if that person has a behavior or a trait. Now, once it didn't end in sex, the person was not a student. The person would not be forced to trade grades for sex or vice versa. How then do we justify that this myth we have, speculated over the decades, perhaps has been accentuated in this drama?
Roland, look, there are several professors and lecturers on Legon campus. How come only Jampo and Butako were picked on? It is something...
Well, the BBC even says that they have others, but
they have...
there were not clear-cut scenarios of you impinging on them such accusations.
And I'm saying that word on the street has it that those two are very terrible. It is something that students have suffered over and over and over again, and word has gotten out. Roland, there are so many men here at Multimedia. So then if there is an investigation into sexual harassment and they narrow it to 2 people, you see...
Like to me and somebody else.
To you and somebody else, it means there is a problem. I said before we got on air that it happens, but the reason why most girls are not able to come out to talk about it is what Dinah said. Look at social media. People are even blaming girls for dressing provocatively, tempting lectures and all that. Now, which girl in her right sense will go through that and with this social media bashing and all that, come out to talk about it? You realize that even the girls in the video were protected. They were masked because of the kind of society we come from. You understand? It is something, what is out there on the street? I mean, you go to some institutions and you talk about sexual harassment and names come up. Probably because the victims feel comfortable enough around you to talk to you. And tell you what, if we go further into this, we'll realize that sex really happened in most cases. But this is just a snippet of what takes place. And BBC cannot be sued by our Jampo. I want to join him in court this morning anyway and see how it goes, because for me it is totally black. It is something that he has done over and over and over again.
So
I'll join him this morning.
But I have a...
And we have to say that you said that it's been speculated. And
it's been speculated.
And that's something he's done over and over. But we have to retract that because we have no evidence of that.
Well, it is my view, not that of Joy.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
But I have a...
But you're sharing it here, so we're mindful of that. Please try and
I retract. Okay.
Okay, so it's been retracted.
So, Roland, I have a little opinion on the title of the video and the reaction of our society. From last night, there has been a lot of comments that, you know what, the video says sex for grades, there was no sex for grade.
Yes, there was not. When I watched it, I also thought so.
People were disappointed because they wanted to see sex, right? Sorry. But I think the bigger issue really is that this video has unearthed the issue of sexual harassment. For you in the media, you have a way of giving titles and giving attraction to your story. But for those of us who work on the field, who work on women's rights and human rights, we're interested in the fact that there was gross act of sexual harassment.
Was there?
There was an intent.
The comments, and if you take Professor Jampe, that is what constitutes sexual harassment.
That was an intent.
Unwanted sexual behavior that manifests in comments, in touching, in behavior, in exchange of things. So even the comments telling girls that I like you in heels, telling women that you are my wife, you are my first, second, third wife,
women
in the office is unacceptable. For many of us who practice it and we are on, that's why we say that we've normalized the conduct. So the video has so many doses of sexual harassment that we needed to be worried about. I want to kiss you violently. Even the word violent on itself is worrying, and the intention, telling somebody sitting across you or in a conversation where you are supposed to be a mentor.
Was in a restaurant.
Does it? So when we're in the restaurant, you can tell me you would want to kiss me violently and it's okay. Those were sexual harassment in the video. For me, if you say you didn't see sex for grade, it's okay. I also didn't see sex for grade, but I was worried about the kind of conversations that were held. And then to follow it up, I listened to Professor Jampo yesterday speak on another station, and he repeatedly said how he likes women in heels and how she had pumped her breast and how, so I mean, and some of it he laughed about it, and I was like, Professor probably doesn't seem to get it yet, that even his mere conversations around this issue is suggestive that he is a harasser, and he probably needs to be schooled on what sexual harassment is and what lines should be crossed. And this is for the entire Ghanaian public. There are certain things you cannot do in the workplace. There are certain things you cannot do with your colleagues. You can't do with your subordinate.
Objectifying women.
Even the way, the touching, let me tell you, your lips, I come to work this morning and somebody looks at me and says, your lips look kissable and sexy this morning. It is harassment. If I feel uncomfortable about it and I tell you and you do not desist from it, I can report you through the formal informal system if the organization has a sexual harassment policy. You look sexy. Your boobs look, somebody will ask, are you wearing a push bra? Your breast looks stood up. Those are gross forms of sexual harassment. They talk about your butt, they talk about your body, even the gestures. People look at you and they are kissing their own lips and making gestures at you. Those are forms of sexual harassment, but we don't know.
Okay. And the man went ahead to talk about holding her, you know, objectifying her, buying her shoes, for outing.
And having worked in the sector, all these insinuations of sexual harassment.
Yeah, it is actually sexual harassment, not insinuations. You're objectifying a woman. You're sleeping with a woman in your mind already. You're seeing a woman and
the person slept with or lasted after the person because of the comments.
Because of the comments. I mean, in a teacher-student environment, it is not healthy. In a work colleague environment, it is not healthy.
Okay.
And if the person does not want it, if it's unwelcome, it is unsolicited, it is sexual harassment. But there are many people who say they love the play relationship they have with their colleagues in the office, but not that you don't develop a relationship in the office where others feel uncomfortable. And it is on sexual grounds.
Yeah. Okay. So I have this, the Telegraph, and the Telegraph has the sexual violence and it's a UK tabloid.
Yeah.
The sexual violence and harassment cases at universities trebled in 3 years. And this was just published. Today's date is 8th, 5 days ago. And it says that universities recorded 1,436 allegations of sexual harassment or sexual violence against students in 2018 and 2019, up from 476 the previous 2 years. And they say that this was obtained under the Freedom of Information laws by the same BBC that published this documentary. Now, they have these outstanding figures. They have these outstanding figures because maybe they have an open society, etc., so people can go to. Is that the situation?
I think so. I think I was saying earlier that if you create an enabling environment where the student doesn't feel threatened that after coming out to report, I will be victimized, after coming out to report, my grades will suffer, my education will be in limbo, we'll have more and more people coming out. Look at Kiki, the lady who did the documentary. She had to leave school because of sexual harassment. And I think that it must have taken her a lot to bounce back. One nearly committed suicide 4 times because of that. That shows how terrifying it is. And so then if our systems are in place and I know, okay, if I go ahead to report this, I'll be protected, my education won't suffer, I'll still be there. And if it's in the workplace, if I go report, my job won't suffer. We'll see more and more women coming out. And I think in Ghana here, our figures will be more than that.
Well, so we'll try and get to the campus of University of Ghana. We sent Nancy Amafajiradosi to give us a conversation with some students and get some experiences. But it would also mean that before we get there, Dinah, we need to have an open system in which people can approach.
Yes.
So, for example, I was asking, why didn't they use a model who is a student, a live student? Was there a possibility?
I think you are the media expert, you know, but I think the reason also was if you're doing, I think this more had to do with the modalities about the undercover work and not knowing which student to trust and how to go about it and not blowing the cover of the work. I suspect so they needed to use members of their team. That's the only reason. It would have been more exciting if we got actual students and then not having the excuses. For example, one of the professors is giving that she's not even my student. She's not a student, so you can go talking about kissing them violently and thinking it's okay. It's the same professor. Sorry.
Okay, so now let's go to that conversation Nancy Amafajiradosi had with the students of the University of Ghana.
So the University of Ghana in 2011, chaired by Professor Ernest Ayite at the time, constituted a 15-member committee to see to it that issues of sexual harassment are investigated and dealt with. Till date, now even though the numbers have been reduced to about 14 members, this board is still active. In fact, in 2017, there was a policy document on sexual harassment, which was meant to deal with this very canker in our various institutions across the country. But today, I'm here at the University of Ghana is because of the famous SexForGrades topic that has been running since yesterday. And I must say that I've been joined by a few of the students to share with me, first of all, what they've heard, what they make of this very important subject, and what they think can be done to ensure that going forward, the issues of sexual harassment are minimal in our various universities. I've been joined by, let me speak to the first person, I'll get her name. What's your name, please?
I'm Abena.
Abena, what level are you in?
I'm level 200.
I am sure that even you've just spent 2 years on campus, I'm sure you've already heard issues about sexual harassment, have you?
Sure, I have.
And what have you heard?
Really, sometimes we hear our fellow mates talking about lecturers, sometimes forcing them to come and have affairs with them to get some grades. But it's not always the case of the lecturers. We also see some students in class trying to look all good, not like all good as in to impress, but all good to harass the lecturers in some kind of ways. So my take on this is, I don't think it should always be the lecturers who are at fault. The students should be looked at, because in the sense that a student try to get rapport with a lecturer for grades, a student try to harass a lecturer through the way they dress, through the way they approach the lecturer. So in my point of view, even though most of the times the lecturers are at fault, sometimes we should view it from the side of the students. And to me, to stop all this or to minimize all these things happening in the university and other universities which have not yet been brought out, there should be laws that, severe laws, like laws that will be enforced, that will make this thing work. Even though there are so many laws in the University of Ghana that goes against this, goes against lecturers having rapport and some intimacy with students, I think it has not been effectively communicated or implemented. They should make it more more severe, to the extent that lecturers will be sacked when all these things are brought out. But sometimes we hear these cases and in a week or two it's off without any implication, without anything being done about it. So to me, there should be sanctions, there should be other things that would deter other students too and other lecturers from engaging in this act. That is my point of view on this.
Thank you very much. But you have not been a victim. You don't know anybody who has been a victim?
No, I've not heard of anybody. I've not seen anybody, and I'm not a victim.
Let me just ask you a question. If you are ever approached by a lecturer to make advances at you and all of that, do you know which department you are supposed to go and speak to?
Okay, so in the University of Ghana, we have so many departments. We have the gender mostly, which helps the ladies. So that's one department or that's one agency you can go to voice out these things. And to me, most girls cannot go to voice these things out because maybe they feel that they wouldn't be respected again, they will feel shy to do all these things. So I think we should take advantage of the agencies that the University of Ghana has provided for we, the students, the gender institutions and the human rights institutions, so that we can go there and voice our problems out. That is what I think.
Thank you very much, Abena. And so let me also speak to the rest of the people standing close to me. You heard her. She thinks that the people engaged in the acts must be punished. Yes, there are laws, but enforcement has always been the problem, and so there should be a way of streamlining and making sure that these people are dealt with. But what about you? You're also in level 200?
Yeah.
What's your name?
Stephanie.
Stephanie. Oh, Stephanie shy.
No.
All right. So you've heard issues of sexual harassment on campus, right?
Yeah.
What did you hear?
The same as my sister said about obtaining grades, like lecturers have sexual, like, relationship with students, and I think sometimes when even they have the sexual intercourse with them, they don't give them the grades that they promise them to give.
But do you know anybody? Has anybody shared a personal experience with you?
Yeah, a friend.
Okay, what did the person say?
And she was like, she was going to recite for a paper, but then the lecturer calls her that she should come. They should like, you should meet her here, she meet here, there, and that is it. And they should have, like, I don't really know, but yes, a relationship.
So this particular person you're talking about, did they affect her academic work?
Not really, no. Actually, she stopped seeing the lecturer. And the lecturer was like, she should come, they should have a study, like free studies.
Okay. But
to take advantage. That's it.
Did your friend know which office, which department to speak to in terms of these abnormalities?
No.
So what did you as a friend tell her?
Actually, I asked it.
So straight away we're going to the BBC, and doing us delight again is having MAYENI Jones, who was on the show yesterday, and she's back, works with the BBC. She's joining us on Skype. Good morning to you right here in Ghana. But in the meantime, we've had certain reactions to this piece coming from the BBC. Others agreeing, others disagree, and so many mixed reactions so far. How's the BBC taking all this?
Well, the reaction in Nigeria has been significant. The topic of SexForGrades and related hashtags were trending in Nigeria all day yesterday, as well as in Ghana, and it was also in the top 10 worldwide trend. So it's caused a huge stir here, lots of people taking to social media to share their own experiences of, being sexually harassed by professors. Many people saying that this isn't just limited to the area of academics, but it stretches also to when you're looking for a job, or if you're trying to seek a promotion. So it seems that this issue of sexual harassment is one that resonates very strongly with the public and one that involves a lot of people.
But did the BBC prove what it set out to confirm, the allegation that sometimes sex is exchanged for grades or vice versa, that is also extracted from students, and the allegation of sex in the meantime? One of the professors here in Ghana says that he's heading straight to court to sue the BBC. What's your reaction to it?
So at the moment, we have no comments as we haven't yet received any notification of this legal action. All that we'll say is that we stand by our journalism. This investigation was carried out following the BBC's incredibly strict editorial standards. Lawyers were consulted, our editorial policy advisors were consulted, and all of the people who were featured in the SexForGrades documentary that aired on YouTube last night went through a thorough process of verifying all of the information that we were given. So this wasn't something that was carried out lightly. It was done after receiving extensive evidence of allegations against these professors, and we stand by our journalism.
Now moving on, in a scenario where maybe the model used is not an actual student, does that then stick to the main intent of the exchange of SexForGrades?
So what we wanted to show was that sexual harassment was taking place in universities. We decided to use trained reporters because these are delicate situations. We were exposing these women to potential harassment and risk. So we made sure that we worked with women who were trained. They were undercover reporters. They weren't students, but this was the best way for us to ensure that their security was carried out. And it was better for us to use journalists rather than endangering real-life students.
Well, thank you very much. We wish you the best for the day. MAYENI Jones, again, doing us the favors, joining us this morning on all the reactions from the BBC right here in their latest documentary and being sticking in the media space right here in Ghana and west with the BBC. But straight away, we'll also try as much as possible, raise on the phone lines a legal practitioner and just ask the normal questions about if somebody is defamed, how do they seek redress in court, and in particular, this very subject. And straight away, Victor Kojoga ADAWUDU is a known legal practitioner in Ghana. He's joining us on the phones. Good morning to you, Mr. ADAWUDU. In the meantime, if somebody is defamed, feels that he or she is had done by a piece, and in this situation, this very documentary, how does that person seek redress in court? What usually is the norm?
Thank you, Roland, and that's a good point to your viewers. If it comes to an issue of defamation, what defamation is all about is that something has been said about you and your reputation or your image, and is to lower the standard or your image or reputation before the decent thinking public, or to ridicule you. So that is all is about defamation. Now, so what is being said, whether it is the truth or it's a fact, it should not lower the person's reputation in the eyes of the public. If it does, and there's a proof that it was calculated to do that, then defamation will stand. Also, there are some defenses to the issues of defamation. One of them you can do is that it is in the interest of the public, and the matter that is arising was in the interest of the public, so the public needed to know what were the issues. So if it's an interest, public interest, that could be a defense that you also come. Two, you can also come on a partial defense and say that yes, or qualified defense and privilege and say, yes, this is true. People have to know the fact of the matter. And also because public interest, because public finances and others are involved, and these are leaders who are shepherding the country or others, then you can say, yes, it is qualified privilege for the interest of the nation to hear it. The danger about it is also that, there's a proverb in my language which says that the monkey says that it's not the person who insults me that pains me, it's the person who amplifies it. And it's the same in defamation. You can get a story from one place, but whilst you play it on your medium and other mediums, the person can take all the mediums that have published that particular material, that, yes, they are publicizing all this, and it is in bid to lower my reputation or image before the public.
Now, in moving on then, in scenarios where if this could be an evidence at all or for public good, scenarios where models are not, let's say in this case, not a student, but a model who's a trained journalist, etc., but still the information and the intent for which the piece had been put together or the objective had been achieved. How does the law react to this?
Hold on, the standard that you have to react to is you have to prove that what you are saying is a fact. You have to make the court believe what you are saying, that story you are saying is. But for the person who has the defense, it's only to create in the mind of the court that what the person is saying is not true. That, yes, so it could be a fact that existed, that had happened. Normally, when it comes to issue of defamation, truth might not necessarily be what the court might be looking for as to the truth. Is it a fact? Did it happen? So those are the things that they will look for. So it is the evidence of what you are saying that has happened. Do you have that evidence to substantiate your allegation that ABCD has happened and I was in the midst? I have personal knowledge of what? Because as before you witness, I said, you must have personal knowledge of the issue.
Okay.
What has happened.
Well, thank you very much, Victor. Kojoga ADAWUDU is a legal practitioner, helping us know what the law's position is, and if somebody is seeking redress by way of defamation, what they can get in the court. In the meantime, the discussion is still on. We have to wrap up, though, but in the wrapping up comment, we do know this is going to get the traction that it's continuing to get for a number of hours, if not days, at the end of the period, there are people or students or ladies either in high holding positions or lower holding spectrum of our society who feel they may have been hard done by in some of these scenarios over the years and currently. How would they look this thing over these things based on your interactions over the years?
My mind tells me that the difference will be made in how the University of Ghana responds to this matter. If the University of Ghana does not take a fair stance and immediately act on this and play dilly-dally and allow these people whose evidence we see is worrying to get away with it, that is the end of the conversation of sexual harassment. The Me Too movement that many people think should not evolve in Ghana will actually not, because after all this effort, painstaking effort has led to the kind of information we have, and the University of Ghana either delays in pursuing this matter, or I think even the statement the University of Ghana gave in the video was, to me, relatively weak if you compare that to the Lagos University. And then you also notice that the Lagos University has taken action. One of the lecturers who was in that video has been suspended, and his church has suspended him. University of Ghana says they're waiting for the video from BBC to take action. We hope that swiftly enough actions will be taken and statements will be made and sanctions will follow appropriately. That will give a lot of women the confidence and other institutions the confidence to rise and actually give zero tolerance to sexual harassment. But talking about the issues about model, I think the issue is coming up a lot. And I think that at the time the lecturers were interacting with the models, they believed in their minds they were students. And for me, that is enough to show that if they were actually students, they were going to do what they were going to do and do more.
Your comments too.
Okay, I think that we've come so far in terms of educating our girls about their rights. But I think there's a time for us advocates to go on the drawing board and educate women more to speak up. We need these girls coming out. We need
because you feel the reactions rather is drowning all the efforts that have been made over the years?
Yes, I think that, you see, most of these girls still go on social media, read the comments, and are cowed into silence. But I think that once we, the advocates with the loud voices, come up, and then the systems are in place, that's the most important thing. The systems of protecting these girls must be solid. We'll have more girls coming up.
But well, and lastly, I think to men, they should understand that if they are not worried about what they do to women, generally, this comes after them. Professor Jampo is going to court. We don't know what Dr. Butako is even doing. What has this done to their reputation? So even if you are not interested in our girls and the future of our women, be concerned about your reputation. Take note, zero tolerance for sexual harassment. It is not on.
And to those defending the act, they are just speaking for themselves. Defending themselves.
All right. Okay. Moving on. I have not been sexually harassed, so well, that's just on the side. But moving on, I've had in the studio Dinah Diko, gender consultant. Thank you, Dinah. And then also Ifwa Chidi is a gender consultant as well, a gender activist and co-convener CSO cluster on decentralization and citizens participation. And we're participating in this discussion.